All right, I'm back again. All right, can people hear me this time? All right. All right, can people hear me this time? All right, we got Yandel, we got Sister Carladine. Can you guys hear me this time? Okay, so I asked if Jesus was alive today, would you give to his cause? Would you give to his ministry? And I saw brother Pastor Fred said, yes, of course I'll give. Okay. Anybody else? Feel free to write that. Would you give to, because I'm asking for everybody, uh would you give would you give if Jesus was, if you were alive during the time of Jesus, would you give? Would you give? Would you give? Okay, Daniel says yes. Joseph of Arimathea gave his tomb to Jesus. Yes, Joseph of Arimathea was one of the rich people of the day, and he donated that his already purchased tomb. Nicodemus, uh, after Jesus' ascension, according to spirit of prophecy, gave to the cause of the gospel, and he was rich, and then he eventually became not so rich because he gave so much to the gospel. Mary gave perfume. That's an awesome example, and here's why I'm gonna mention that, because Mary gave perfume, but you know who said that she gave too much for that perfume, and that money should be given to the treasurer so that it can be given to the poor? You know who was saying that? Judas. Judas was saying that. And let's see what Sister Ella G. White says in Desire of Ages, chapter 62, about Judas. Judas was the treasurer for the disciples, and from their little store he had secretly drawn for his own use, thus narrowing down their resources to a meager pittance. He was eager to put into the bag all that he could attain. The treasure in the bag was often drawn upon to relieve the poor, and when something that Judas did not think essential was bought, he would say, why was this waste? Why was not the cost of this put into the bag that I carry for the poor? Now, the act of Mary was in such marked contrast to his selfishness that he was put to shame. And according to his custom, he sought to assign a worthy motive for his objection to her gift. Turning to disciples, he asked, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? Then he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had hit the bag and bear what was put therein. Judas had no heart for the poor. He had no heart for the poor. Had Mary's ointment been sold and the proceeds fallen into possession, the poor would have received no benefit. So you guys said yes, you would give to you would have given to Jesus's ministry. Guess who was the treasurer? Judas. Guess what that money went to? Him. He didn't give it to the poor. He was supposed to go to the poor. It didn't go to the poor. He kept it for himself. He was covetous. They gave him 30 pieces of silver. He purchased a piece of land with that silver for betraying Jesus. This guy was selfish. So and he was the one saying, oh, you should have given me that money. We would have given it to the poor. He didn't care about the poor. So sometimes there's some people who may be Judases in the church, and that's what we have to be cognizant of. But does that mean we shouldn't give? Okay, because you don't want to give to Judas because we know now. But if we were moved to see how God was working through Jesus, and we said we should give to his ministry, you give to his ministry. Because does that sin come back to you that the money was used improperly? No. That the sins of Judas do not fall upon those who gave properly. Now, Mary, moved by the Spirit of God, didn't give to Judas. She spent it on that perfume and gave a cleansing of the feet to Jesus to show her true humility and love for him. So, you know, um, so that's basically what I have to say about that. So it doesn't mean that because man has the ability to mess up how they use money, doesn't mean that we shouldn't give. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't give. It means that we should continue to pray for our treasurers, continue to pray for our leaders, that they use the funds properly and that it is used to God's glory. But does that mean that we hold back our funds? No. Because you know that God gave us this call to give back to God our tithes and our offering. Well, I should say his tithe, well, his money, because that's what it says in Malachi. It's his money he's asking for back. Because if you don't give it, you're robbing him. Because he's the one that gave you the money. Right? Give unto Caesar that which is Caesar, but give back to which is God's. And God owns everything. If you have money in your pocket, if you have money in your bank account, it is by the grace of God. If you have air in your lungs, it's by the grace of God. And every single thing that God gives us, we should be willing to return to God willingly, not begrudgingly, not hesitatingly. You know, that's why I brought up that question. Should we base our tithes and our offering on our gross or our net pay? All right. Should we base it on our gross or our net pay? And a lot of you said, let's see the statistics. It said is it important to know what ministry or mission your tithe is used for? 77% said yes, and I believe the church is very transparent in what they use the money for. So if anyone wants to challenge me, feel free to comment about that. I can't take calls. I'm sorry, but I had to switch from my phone. It just died. Let's see. But there was a question I had. Where is it? Yes. Do you base the amount you give based on your gross or your net? That was 50-50. People said, I give it on the gross amount of my paycheck. Other people said, I give it on the net. Okay. This is not a big issue. And I'm not going to say that either or is a sin or either or is a spiritual issue. It's just, in my belief, that you give according to the gross pay, because we're supposed to give things to God first. So even though the government likes to take the money from us because they don't trust us, they know that if we get the money, we're going to spend it. And then when they ask for their money with taxes and they come to our door with taxes, they're not going to find any money. Just like student loans. Student loans is asking for their money. They can't find it, right? Because we already spent it. So the government is smart. They know that, so they take it out first. But really, the person you're supposed to pay first is God. So I believe that you pay according to the gross, and when you give accordingly, God will bless accordingly. So that's my belief. But if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. There's no real verse to go on why you should give according to gross or net. Now, if you are an entrepreneur and you receive money without getting taxed, definitely you should give according to the profit, because if you're spending money to make money in your business, what you spent is what you spent. What you make is your profit, because I believe that's how the government will tax you as well. So that's how you should give according to your tithes and offering. You should tithe and offering according to your increase, not by what you decreased. A good example is Genesis. Genesis chapter 4. I can't switch to see my notes anymore, but in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain just gives fruits of his garden, but Abel brings of his first flock, or the first lambs, and he gives that as a sacrifice to God. And we all know Abel's was considered a proper sacrifice, and it was not accepted by Cain. Most people say, oh, it's because the sacrifice was an animal and you're supposed to give animal instead of the fruit. That's not true. You were able to give offerings that were fruit and grain. It's because Cain did not give of the first of his produce. He gave the leftovers. You don't give God the leftovers. You give God first. All right. That's how you show that you have trust in God. That's how you show that you have faith in God. That's how you show you have obedience toward God's will. And that's what stewardship is all about. It's about faith, obedience, and trust in God's will. So it's not really about the money. It's about that. And that's what Abel did, because did they both give basically the same amount? Yeah. Did God accept Cain's? No. Why? Because he gave the leftovers. So that means God was an afterthought in Cain's mind. Abel thought of God first, and God accepted that sacrifice. So, in that is basically what I wanted to say about that. Let me read the comments. So everyone's saying they can hear me. Eric Quintana says true. Donnell says we should give and organize to an organization before we give to the cause directly. Okay? We can hold them accountable. Yes, we can hold the church accountable. And just like with our government, and we elect leaders that will represent us and stand up for what we believe in and how we should be taxed. Same thing with the church, because we have representatives that go to those meetings and can vote how the funds are distributed and all these kinds of things. For conferences, it's the executive committee, and usually executive committees for every level. They make those decisions. So definitely we can be, should we trust? I believe our church is transparent, but we can trust that God knows what he's doing. Even if man doesn't know what he's doing, we can trust that God knows what he's doing. And we have to say to ourselves, it's not our money, it's God's money. When you say to yourself, it's not your money, it's God's money, it starts to become easier, because that's one of the things that we deal with. We are covetous towards our own money. We work hard for it. We earned it. We inherited it. It was given to us, but we don't want to give it away foolishly. And that is true. We shouldn't do it foolishly. That's what stewardship is all about. But when you say to yourself and you understand that it's God's money, just like when you say to yourself, the Sabbath is God's time, when you say to yourself, because in the Old Testament time, they understood those things. They gave God that time. They even dedicated their firstborns to God. They understood that. A good example is Hannah. She gives Samuel to the temple. She just says, here, God, I promised you, and now he's yours. And she was blessed with children after the fact, but that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to say what God has given us, still belongs to God, and it's not for us to hold back. And that's what's interesting about money. Money is one of those things where we become really, you know, cognizant and really tight with it. We don't want to spend, we don't want to lose it. You know, you look at your bank account once you get paid and you feel good, and then all of a sudden all your auto pays come in, and then you look at your account and then you're like, "Oh my goodness, I have nothing." You know, you first open your paycheck and you see how the government already took all the money. You didn't even get to confess, you didn't even get to have a conversation and say, you know, could you not take it out this week and all these things. Nope, they already took it out. There's nothing you can do about it. Social Security is already taken out. FDIC, not FDIC, the other taxes, I forget them, but they're all taken out. And you deposit it into your account, and you feel okay, even though you're feeling sad that the government took the taxes. And then you start seeing the auto pay come, your rent, your car payment, the insurance, your phone bill. And then all of a sudden you look at the account, you're like, oh my goodness. And now you have to come after getting all that on a Friday morning or a Thursday afternoon, seeing all your money dwindle down. And then you have to go to church and then take out your checkbook and put it in and write down 10% for tithes, and then 15%, another 10%, which is a good practice on the 10-10, another 10% for offering for your local church. And you know, you're saying to yourself, man, I don't have any money. And then you try to bargain with God. You say, God, you see my bills, you see my paycheck, come on, why do I have to give? Can I do it next week? Can I pay you back? Because if you start trying to do that bargaining of paying back, you know, I owe you, God, you're gonna be owing a whole lot. You're gonna look at you're gonna look at how much you owe God and be like, oh no, I'm not taking out of my refund the $3,000 I owe for tithes and offering. No, thank you, because I only got 3,500, and I need to I need to put into my car and all that. That's how we are with money, you know. But when you say to yourself that this is not my money, this is God's money. Just like when you borrow money from someone and you are a faithful steward, because there's some people that borrow money and they're not faithful, and you realize that once you get your paycheck, you need to pay who you borrow from. You pay them first, because you don't want to be chased. You know, you don't want your friend to turn into no longer your friend. You don't want your friend to turn into that mobster who's asking for his money every week. Like, where's my money? Right? And it puts a hindrance on the friendship. So can you imagine? God, even himself in Malachi, is telling his people, he's saying, you guys are robbing from me. Where's my money? You know? Eric Quintana says, in total, they take in Massachusetts 15% from your paycheck. So that's a lot. That's a lot of money, especially for us in the middle class and those who are making minimum wage and not making a lot. That's a lot of money taken out of your paycheck, and then you have to give 10%, right? Some of us, me, cannot give the same amount to God. Oh, okay. Donnell says, our churches, especially in this country, as a non-profit organization, have to be better stewards. Okay, so definitely, that's a good thing about churches. They're not taxed, so we have to be. I believe in being in a denomination that is transparent with its money, and I believe Seventh-day Adventists are as transparent as it can be. Other denominations, I'm not sure. I've never been a member of their churches. I know some denominations can be very extremely wealthy, and usually that money can go to high in the administration, and they can hoard it. Some denominations actually have their own country, so you know, so some denominations own lots of land. Some denominations own historical priceless artifacts, so they have a lot of money. Um, so, but so, and there's that also brings up the topic of um, certain preachers and pastors who are able to afford Lamborghinis and ask the church to buy them a Learjet when they already own Lamborghinis and mansions, and that can be a sore topic for those people, members of those churches, and that's something I. Donnell says Andrews definitely stays blessed. Yes, through not only the subsidies taken from conferences, but of course, a lot of contributions come and make sure that this place is doing well. So that's good. But that's the issue, because people believe in Andrews and its mission, but then there's other ministries that are still under the Seventh-day Adventist Church umbrella, but they don't believe in them, so they don't contribute. There's other ministries that aren't underneath the umbrella that do very well. Amazing Facts is one of them. 3ABN, that's not underneath the Seventh-day Adventist denomination umbrella. It's considered, it's part of the denomination, as in they follow everything that the denomination believes, but it's not an organization within the organization, and they survive solely on donations, and they're doing well. So when you believe in a ministry, people tend to donate, but then people are hesitant to donate to their own church. So we have to believe in the ministry across the board and be willing to give what God asked us to give. And for tithe, that's 10%. Offering, there's no percentage given. We know tithe is 10% because that's where you get it from. Tithe is 10. But offering can be whatever God speaks to your heart to give. But according to Malachi, that it needs to be given as well as tithe, because the tithe goes to conferences and the division and the union. Well, technically division is a sub part of the GC, so really it's given to the conference and to the union and to the GC, and the GC then funnels it back to the divisions. But offerings is supposed to stay for the local church unless otherwise specified. So if you want your church, you believe in your church ministry, you believe in your church, what it does, it needs to receive that offering as well, to keep the lights on, to keep the heat on, especially in the cold churches up here north. They need to have that heat, man. We can't be coming into that church and being cold. We need that heat. That oil and that gas needs to be running, and that costs money. Even though we're not taxed, we still have bills that we have to pay. So the only thing that a church should not have to worry about under its budget is the pastor's salary, and that's provided by the conference. And the reason I love the Seventh-day Adventist Church in that fact is because if a church provides the salary to a pastor, then the pastor will have another motivation to increase the membership of his church, which is to make more money. And that's not something they should be thinking about in ministry. So you can see in other denominations, when they have a big church, they're making a lot of money because they have a big church, and the tithe goes directly to them. So I prefer it this way. The way we do it, it goes to the conference. So if the church is an organized church within the conference, that pastor will be paid as much as he would be no matter where he is in the conference. If he has 50 members, he'll be paid the same as if he had a church of 200. And that's fair. That's fair. And it keeps pastors honest. It keeps pastors honest into wanting to propel the ministry and evangelizing for the right reasons and not for financial benefits. So that's one of the things I totally agree with this denomination of, especially when we see other denominations, pastors or ministers asking for funds for Learjets, um, and they're asking for, and then they give the stewardship sermon and they talk about pouring money all over the altar and these kinds of things, and yet they're living more lavish lives than most of their members. You know, kind of gives that cringe feeling, right? Here's a church where a lot of members are maybe police officers or TSA, and they haven't had a paycheck for so many weeks, and then this pastor is still asking for tithes and offering, and then he gets in his car and it's a Maserati. you know how would you feel? I wouldn't feel good about that. I wouldn't feel good that you know I'm here financially struggling, and there's a pastor driving. Not to say that there's not Seventh-day Adventist pastors who are doing well, but usually it's because they're good stewards. I know some pastors who are doing well, and it's mostly good stewardship. They save their money, and they give their tithes and offering back. That's another thing. Um, Pastors and administrators in the Seventh-day Adventist Church are required to give tithe and offering back as well. So they're not doing something that you're not doing. Other denominations, do you know? Not to bash other denominations, but that's one of the reasons. For those who are Seventh-day Adventists, I say one of the reasons why I trust what we do and how we spend money. Not to say that we're perfect, but okay. All right, so Donnell says, what if the tithe stayed local and the offering went to the conference? One, for some strange reason, from my experience in church ministry, people are more faithful because God says tithe is 10%. People are more faithful into giving the 10%. Tithe is 10%, it's 10%. People are like, I'm not messing with God. God said 10%. I'm giving 10%. Because the offering has no number associated with it, people give according to what they feel and what their spiritual maturity is. So people say a good rule is 10%, 10%. So it's equal both ways. Some people give maybe, more, 20%, 15%. But a lot of times the offering can be much, much less than 10%. And then the offering is very little. So also, I was going to give what Sister White says about it. The tithe is supposed to go into the storehouse. Okay. Testimonies of the Church. Sister White says, 1/10 faithfully laid aside. He requires this portion to be placed in his treasury. It is to be rendered to him as his own. So tithe, according to Scripture, does say that it should not be going back to pay local bills and stuff like that. It's supposed to be going to the mission of the church. And what the mission of the church really is paying those who are doing that, which is the pastors doing the mission of the church. And there's other things that the conference and unions use their tithes and offering, the tithes for. Offering, it goes back to the local church to pay those things. So according to Spirit of Prophecy and the Bible, tithe is supposed to go to the in the Old Testament, it went to the temple. So for us, we don't have a temple, so we give it to the conference, and then they give it to the general conference and the union. So that's why we give tithe. The tithe goes up and the offering stays back. Also, offering is much less So those who are in ministry wouldn't be, because already there's a lot of, pastors needing to be laid off, pastors who have 3, 4, 5 churches and all these things, because there's still not enough funds. So if we lowered the funds even more, that wouldn't be a good thing for the gospel. The tithe go to the conference and the offering stay in the church, or whatever you like. That's what Era's replying to Don. And in replying to Don, yes, they run a nonprofit because they help the community in different areas. At least that is in the Adventist church. Okay. Yes, and other ministries that they yes, they are a nonprofit, so they're not using so when you're a nonprofit, I'm not too sure about the taxes when you're a nonprofit, but basically they're not holding money for profit. They're just paying who needs to be paid and using money for the propelling of the gospel. Which brings me to another point. So if you're enjoying what we do here at Real People, Real Lives, feel free to donate. We use the funds fully for the ministry. We are not using it to be to profit, and we're not asking for much. We're just asking for we're not asking for 10%, 5%, just whatever you can give. Please do, because we use that money to fund and pay little things that we use for this ministry, such as the wonderful flyers that we use onto our social media accounts so that people can be interested in what we do. We use those funds for that. So if you are able to, feel free to donate to our Cash App, which is $RPRL show. $RPRL show. And if you are a member of our Facebook group or like our page, and you do give the question of, we want to see what you use the funds for, trust me that you will get a report on that. We will be fully transparent, and we will allow you to see what we use the funds for, so that you will see that we are not using it so that Eric Jean-Baptiste or any other team member can go out to eat at a nice restaurant or pay off a bill or something like that. No, we are using it for Real People, Real Lives. And that's what we should be doing. And that's what the church should be doing. And that's what the conference should be doing at all times. So once again, if you're enjoying what we do here at Real People, Real Lives, our YouTube is Real People, Real Lives. Feel free to just put it in the search and then filter it to channel, and you should find us. You should find our logo. We only have 11 subscribers, so please feel free to subscribe and share our content. Our Instagram and Twitter is at RPRL Show. So that is our Instagram and our Twitter. We are always sharing our content there. Our Facebook group is Real People, Real Lives. You can find it easily. And our page is Real People, Real Lives. And you can just find it from our logo, and you'll know that that's the correct one. Feel free to comment, share, pass it on to somebody who you think will enjoy our content and our discussions. So today we discussed, do you trust the church with your money? Personally, my answer was, yes, I trust the church, but I'm careful with my wording, because I will say that it's not my money. It's not my money. It is God's money. So I'm basically just giving God, I'm giving back God what he is owed. So with my faith in God, knowing that he doesn't need my money, that he will take care of everything after that. Is the church very transparent with how we use the funds? Yes. Are we perfect? No. So those are my basic answers to those questions. And I think that's it. Donnell says too much red tape with it. Well, that's that you need, that red tape when it comes to regulations and making sure that people don't run off with the money and do whatever they want willy-nilly and do things. You don't want an executive committee that has 17 members just say, all right, we're going to use $1 million to do this, No, you want there to be red tape, so you know that they're doing everything by the book, they're doing everything right, that they're following general conference regulations, they're following union regulations, they're following the conference regulations, so that they are doing right by the church and God's ministry in spending the money, because we all need to be faithful stewards. And a way to make sure that money is spent properly is red tape. So, yeah, can it be a pain? Can the regulations be upsetting? Can it feel like it's slowing things down? Yes, but the more regulations, the more you feel like, okay, nobody's just taking these funds and buying themselves something personally. All right, and anytime you use conference funds or anything like that, they require receipts immediately, and they're always making sure that the money is spent properly. Oh man. So at least in my experience with conferences. So with that being said, if anyone has any last comments or anything they wanted to say, all right. Okay. So it is 11:40. So we're supposed to end at midnight, but I think I basically said everything I wanted to say, and we're getting tired. So so we talked about, so I'm going to, oh yes, I'm going to end on this. Acts chapter 20, verse 35. I have showed you all things, how that so laboring you ought to support the weak, and to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said, it is blessed to give than to receive. That was a saying of Jesus Christ, but it wasn't found in the Gospels. But it was such a well-known saying that Paul quotes Jesus there, and it is attributed to Jesus. It is a saying that Jesus said. It's not found in the Gospels, but anyone who personally witnessed Jesus and saw him preach probably heard him say at one point or another, it is more blessed, it is better to give than to receive, as we usually say it today. It is better to give than to receive. And that is the primary reason why we give our tithes and our offering. God is teaching us to learn it is better to give than to receive. If we are always looking forward to how much we receive and how rich we are and how much we have, we're forgetting and missing the mark of sacrifice and of what love is. Love is not selfish. God is love. God is not selfish. So don't be afraid to give to God, because God will never hold back what he wants to give to you. First of all, he gave his only son so that you may live forever in eternity with him. And heaven is known to be so lavishly wealthy that you will never have to work, or you'll never have to wonder where your food will come. You'll never have to wonder where you'll get clothes. All of these things God will take care of. God did it for the nation of Israel. In the wilderness, their clothes lasted because God supernaturally kept their clothes brand new all throughout the wilderness. They didn't have to make clothes all the time because he made sure that their sandals didn't wear out. He made sure that their clothes didn't shred and tear. He was watching over them. So when God asks us to give, just give, because it's not like God is going to withhold from you, right? When people ask you for money, why are you hesitant? Because you're like, if he asks for something more than I can give and it's a loan, he'll never give me back that money, right? God is not that way. First of all, it's not a loan for God. It's God's money in the first place. And second of all, he'll always give that money back to you. He'll always do that. He'll always do that. He never keeps what he has from his people. He always go throughout the Bible. Anyone who was faithful to God and gave what God asked never had to worry. Sometimes they received more than they needed. Abraham, millionaire. Isaac, millionaire. Jacob, millionaire. Joseph, I would say in today's equivalent, probably billionaire. All right. Job, millionaire. I would say a billionaire in today's standards. There's always going to be those that receive from God and be blessed. And the better you are at being a steward, and that's not only giving it to God, but taking care of what God gives you in your own household, in your own funds, you'll have better. You'll have better in your account. You'll have better for everything. All right. So, with that being said, I will end it here. So, God bless everybody. Once again, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at RPRL Show. If you enjoy our content and you believe that there's somebody who can be blessed by it, and you feel like somebody could be blessed by partaking in the conversation, please share the content, tag them, invite them to like the page. Our page is Real People, Real Lives, Facebook group, Facebook page, YouTube, search Real People, Real Lives, and you can donate to our Cash App, $RPRL Show, and we will be definitely transparent to those who ask how we use those funds. So, with that being said, happy Sabbath, God bless, and we'll see you next Friday.